All right, hello folks, and welcome to another Trader Talks. My name is Mark O'Brien, and I'm the Vice President of Sales here for Ontario and Atlantic Canada. And I am your host for the first episode of 2021. We have an exciting Trader Talks planned today, where we will take somewhat of a different approach to the format we've been using in the past. We're actually going to be going through the most frequently asked questions that we get from our dealer partners across the country regarding dealership websites and the overall capabilities of our T-Advantage website platform. And we're joined in this episode by our experts in the domain of dealership websites. First of all, Mike Kalinsky, who's our Vice President of Product Software, and Matt Lawson, who is our Vice President of Dealer Software. Mike and Matt will be helping us answer some of the most frequently asked questions. Gents, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having us, Mark. Great to be here.
Excellent.
Good. Thanks, Mark.
Good. Well, listen, Mike, I'm going to start with you. Let's kind of start with a topic that we know is very crucial for every website. And of course, it's very relevant at the moment, given the recent rollout of new legislation across the country in various provinces. And that is the topic of web accessibility. Mike, can you maybe start off by sharing some specifics surrounding web accessibility?
Yeah, sure. So Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, more commonly referred to as WCAG 2.0, is essentially an international standard for web accessibility developed by the World Wide Web Consortium. That's an international team of experts on that specific topic. So in a nutshell, the regulators or the regulations are intended to make it easier for everyone to be able to access their websites, as well as content situated across the dealer website. Each guideline, as prescribed by the WCAG2 compliancy standards, has really three levels: A, AA, and AAA. And AAA compliance is very seldom required. Definitely not at this time. However, sometime in the future, it may become compulsory. So for the most part, moving from level A to AA is progressive, meaning you must meet the criteria as laid out in level A before you can shift to be compliant with specifics laid out in level AA. And from our standpoint, we recommend that you review provincial guidelines. They may be a little bit different to familiarize yourself with the dates also around when the different compliances will be enforced. And to further elaborate, so what's contained in the different levels. So in level A, notably the accessibility criteria are around non-text content. So essentially providing alternatives for time-based media such as captions and video, adaptable and distinguishable content, for instance, use of color providing controls specific to audio, keyboard accessibility, where your website does not contain functionality that fits within what is defined as a keyboard trap, providing users enough time to read and use the content. There's even navigable content that's appropriate to page titles, links with context, and then finally readable text content, so ensuring size, placement are rendering correctly in a readable way by all website users. Just a little bit further, so level AA builds upon level A. So AA included in that are additional aspects for distinguishable content, for instance, to resize text, providing multiple ways to navigate your website, and finally input assistant with a focus on error suggestion and error prevention. So as a start of this year, provinces for the most part have introduced compliance deadlines. In Ontario, for instance, all public websites and web content posted after Jan 1st in 2012 must meet WCAG 2 level AA compliancy and other criteria such as 1.24, which is live captions, and 1.25, which is pre-recorded audio descriptions, will be necessary also. But overall, there's a lot of complexities in here. So really what I would do is I'd recommend yourselves to become familiarized with the different guidelines. They're all available online, and then bring them up with your web providers.
And Mike, staying with you, how do web accessibility standards relate to dealership websites, and specifically, what steps should dealers take to ensure they're compliant with these guidelines?
Yeah, so speaking directly to our website platform, we are fully compliant. So from a technical perspective, there should be nothing that you as a dealer should be worried about. However, there are some caveats in that. Obviously, our platforms are highly flexible. You can edit and add content. So if you're editing or adding content, you've got to be cognizant of these guidelines. Good example might be, for instance, if you're adding an image on, let's say you're building a landing page for some form of a campaign, and that image has text embedded in it, you've got to ensure that that text is reflected in the alt tags. So this is, we provide the tools, and where applicable, automatically ensure that you are compliant, but there are these nuances that you have to take care to ensure that you remain compliant. Third-party plugins, obviously, we're completely agnostic. We enable all different types of third-party plugins. You've got to hold those providers compliant also. And ultimately, I think another piece that I would say you've got to pay attention to, and that is image overlays. So that's going to be something that that you'll need to enforce also. So if you're putting text on images and so forth, ensure that that's available in alt tags.
Mike, are there any potential legal or financial repercussions for those that don't abide by the accessibility standards with their own dealership website?
Yes, yeah. So you could be facing steep fines from provincial regulatory bodies if your sites don't meet the accessibility guidelines. At this point, we're not certain if regulatory bodies will be proactively going through websites to assess compliance and accessibility standards, or if their approach will be reactive, where they will respond to complaints from website users. In any case, we do recommend dealerships to take necessary steps to ensure their websites comply with local regulations. Good.
And Mike, one last question on this topic. Can you shed some light on T-Advantage website compliance with web accessibility standards? I mean, what are the specifics of the platform to ensure dealerships that are on the T-Advantage platform are compliant with these regulations in each of the provinces?
100%. So I kind of briefly touched on that before. Web accessibility is baked into the T-Advantage platform, so no additional plugins are required. Our websites take into consideration the province in which the dealership operates, and specifically also adheres to regulations laid out by those regulatory bodies as they relate to web accessibility.
That's great, Mike. Thanks for shedding some additional light on that. And I'm sure many dealers will take the steps necessary of assessing compliance with those guidelines. Next topic I wanted to talk about is something that just continues to be on the rise in terms of popularity, and what many experts consider is a must for any dealership looking to meet consumer demand as well as expectations, and that is the topic of digital retailing. And I'm going to go over to Matt here. Matt, one of the top questions that we've been getting from dealers is, are consumers really ready to buy a car online?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And yeah, this has been a narrative that's existed in our industry now for going on about 6 years. And I think definitely we're starting to see the consumer alignment with the prospect of online retailing and automotive. And when I say that, I mean, we can look at the new entrants to the market through non-traditional retailers, right? And we've seen, how Carvana, that business has grown substantially in the U.S. market over the last number of years. We saw last year an IPO from Vroom, which is another non-traditional retailer, which was highly successful. Those businesses have grown at a really rapid pace. And now in Canada, we're starting to see the growth of non-traditional retailers in Canada. When I say non-traditional, Mark, what I mean is these sort of retail agencies that are selling vehicles to consumers through a technology stack that provides an improved consumer purchase journey. It's non-traditional in the sense that majority of the interaction is done in a virtual environment. And so with that kind of proof of concept now existing here in Canada, we're starting to see more and more dealers adopting digital retailing strategies inside of their dealerships. And so, over time, as we've seen just over the last year, kind of an acceleration of more dealers offering these capabilities to the consumer, it starts to shape kind of the consumer expectation. And we do start to see the efficacy of this solution take hold with consumers. In addition to all of those points, the other thing that we do, as you know, on an ongoing basis here is a lot of consumer research, right? And in March of this year, we worked with one of our research agency partners, and we went out and spoke with over 2,500 Canadians. And we asked them all sorts of questions in those consumer surveys. And one of the questions that was in there this year was, would you consider fully purchasing a vehicle online? And 41% said that they would consider the full purchase of a vehicle online in that research. So think about that, right? I mean, that number was probably substantially less a number of years ago. Right. And if we just look cross sectors in retail and the digitization of traditional retail and other sectors, the one I most commonly use of late is food, right? And ever since the pandemic, the acceleration at a traditional retail for food has changed, right? Grocery shopping, I do my groceries every week on my mobile phone, and they show up at my door just a few hours later. And right now, and particularly in Ontario, a lot of restaurants are closed, but we want to be able to support those restaurants, and so we do that through our mobile phone. And so the purchase experience has evolved in a lot of different ways through technology. And it's here. It has solidified itself in automotive. We see it with, as I mentioned, non-traditional. We see it with traditional retailers now. And the consumer journey is starting to adopt these new, convenience mechanisms. And we see that now in the data, in the performance of our dealers. So a long answer, Mark, but I think the notion of digital retail is here to stay. And, there's lots of proof points around that.
Right. So, I mean, several times in your answer, you've referred to the dealerships themselves. Obviously, they play a significant role in the deployment of a successful digital retailing experience. Can you elaborate on the role of the dealership in the experience?
Yeah, and this is really critically important. And to any dealer partners out there who's watching this video, or just dealers that maybe aren't partners, the most important thing that you can do inside your operation is augment your process of how you treat these new type of leads. So if somebody is engaging on your dealership website or on your autoTRADER listings that are enabled with digital retailing, and they create an account and a payment profile, it is really important that you treat that lead differently than standard leads, and engage that consumer in a virtual way instead of just trying to get them into the dealership on a specific day and time, and use the tools inside of the platform to help facilitate that conversation. And so dealers that we see who are using the tools to be able to facilitate those conversations and drive that consumer deeper into the purchase experience through the tool set, they grow their conversion rates substantially over just traditional lead management process. So the operation is equally as important to the technology in terms of the success outcomes that dealers should expect.
And speaking of success, Matt, what success has Trader seen with digital retailing since it's been introduced?
Yeah, it's through deep analysis of several hundred dealers over the last 18 months, we now have a better idea of what success looks like. And I think when we started, initially when we launched digital retailing on autoTRADER and started working with dealers with digital retailing on the T Advantage websites, we were really looking to try and identify what that ROI story was, and now we know, which is it's defined in multiple dimensions, in fact. And one of the first dimensions is that we actually see a growth in traditional website lead submissions. And what I mean by that is chat or form submissions off of the website, usually the VDP on that specific car, which sounds bizarre, but what we see is that the user engages in the digital retailing tool set, payment configuration, right? Maybe they might even go all the way through F&I protection plans. And then before they submit or create an account there, maybe they go back and they submit a form which just checks to see if that vehicle is still in stock. And so we see a lot of that behavior. So traditional lead counts, we see grow just as an average mark by 10% over the previous period when they didn't have the digital retailing tool set enabled. Okay, so for any dealer out there, you can just do the math on whatever your absolute lead generation is for your website in a given month, put a 10% multiplier on it, and that is the first success outcome that you can expect. The second success outcome that you can expect is off your autoTRADER listings. If you're listing your cars on autoTRADER, we have seen as high as 30% growth on traditional leads through their autoTRADER listings. The same type of behavior. And then we have the actual digital retailing account creations, which are additive to those two things. Okay, so that's three different dimensions which increase the quantity of the opportunity for the dealership. And then we look at quality, right? Because quantity is great, but if it's not good quality, then it could become really inefficient. And so we've measured the quality of the additive benefit of those account creations through the digital retailing profile. And we see, just as an average across all our customer base, an improvement of, once the consumer becomes known to the dealer and selling them a vehicle, 80%. Okay, and we've seen it go as high as, in some cases, 300, which sounds a bit extreme. But when using the tools as prescribed inside the operation and the implementation into the website, that is what a dealer should expect to see.
Those are some incredible insights, Matt. Thanks for that. One of the most important aspects of running a successful website, Mike, I'm going to come back to you here for a second, is ensuring that it's being seen by the right audience, which kind of brings us to the next topic, which is search engine optimization, commonly referred to as SEO. The top question that dealers want to know is, how can they get their website to show up on the first page of the search results page?
Very broad question, but very good question. I guess really, your investigation would have to start in understanding your consumer intent. That's probably where you'd have to start to do the work and really start to understand the intent that drives a consumer to a specific type of search. All different searches will result in different tactics that you can start to enforce. So that is really what I'd recommend, is really start to understand the different types of searches, the consumer intent, and what kind of information are they looking from a web search. The next piece then is I'd recommend doing the analysis, spending the time and understanding the competitive landscape. I can recommend a tool that we use internally. It's called SEMrush. That tool will allow you to understand localized search criteria, what your competitors are doing, the types of search results that they are appearing top of, and also what consumers are searching for. I think it's a very, very valuable tool that's going to help structure you and understand the types of tactics and potentially the strategy that you'd want to enforce from something like an SEO strategy, a longer term, more substantial SEO strategy. After that is you've got to have the right analytics insights. So whether using Google Analytics, whether using maybe Adobe, really start to tag your sites up, understand how consumers are getting into your sites, and how they're using your websites. That's going to also highlight maybe some content gaps, specifically if you start to understand what the competitors are doing. And then lastly, it's kind of the little bit more tactical pieces. So from local search, you've got to take a look at Google My Business. There's a lot of things that you can start to take a look at and how to benefit from creating your exposure from local search criteria. And then lastly, actually, there's two more items. So page speed, your site speed will have a really big impact. And lastly, actually, the topic that we've covered, which is WCAG compliancy. Believe it or not, most of the items covered under A and AA are kind of best SEO best practices. So
right.
Things such as ensuring text is written correctly, alt tags, etc. So if you focus on all of those, you should see a benefit in your listing, in your competitive criteria in search.
Good. And Mike, what are some of the common areas of optimization that yield good, strong SEO results?
So let's focus on page speed. There's three metrics that I would say that every single dealer should be looking at. Google provides tools to be able to start to take a look at, and that is first contentful paint, largest contentful paint, and cumulative layout shift. Those are the three. Google recommends kind of benchmarks, so I just recommend that the dealers go in and do a search for those three metrics. Ensure that you're within those benchmarks. Keep in mind that if you start to use third-party tools, chats, any other plugins, all of them are going to start weighing your site down. So, there's a give and take. The more you start to load onto your sites, the slower those sites will become. Also, ensure that you measure desktop versus mobile. So those elements I'd recommend. From a local search perspective, so this is more on Google My Business listings. I'd recommend for dealers to take a look at their secondary categories, ensure that those are clearly defined. Pay attention to your Google reviews, respond to them, specifically the negative ones. GMB posts, these are Google My Business posts, utilize that with promotions, be active on there. Also add services. There's an area that you can add additional service and market your services. Utilize the products feature inside Google My Business. Pre-populate your questions and answers. And then on site, I'd recommend to take a look at your local schema. So this is kind of markup on your website. This is what Google uses to crawl and understand the pages on your websites. That can be done through tactics like using JSON-LD, which is JavaScript and so forth. A little bit more technical. Those are kind of the areas that I'd recommend.
Now, some website providers, they advertise their solution or their platform as having SEO built in. If SEO is already built in, why would a dealer invest in additional SEO services?
Yeah. So usually what that means is technical SEO. So the structure of the website, all the automation that's built in there allows Google to understand the information on your site. It allows Google to be able to crawl through your site effectively, index your pages quickly. So that's really what we talk about is kind of the technical SEO perspective. There's a lot of good optimizations that good providers do on their sites. to help Google understand the content. The SEO services are, these are more manual, and this is where you will reach and have the biggest benefit, but it's also where it's mostly manual and you'll have to put in a lot of effort. And really, I could summarize that into the content that will delight consumers. So what do we mean by that? It's new content. If you're repurposing content that's already available, why would Google raise you above the people who originated that content? So really start to think about this. How can you delight a consumer? And that's really those pieces of content send Google a message that it's interesting to consumers, and then Google will rank your site higher, or those pages, that specific content, higher. And that has to be, in most cases, manual effort. You really have to give it thought. It has to be part of a long-term marketing plan to really identify those areas. Generally, again, if we go full circle, it's based on understanding your competitive environment, understanding what consumers want, the type of information that they're searching for. Focus on local content also. So when we talk about this content that delights, have a bias on local areas, local content. And then lastly, I'd say, think about the evergreen type content. So this is content that generally won't expire. So things such as competitive reviews, when you look at a specific make, model, trim versus maybe a competitor make, model, trim. Also, focus on video content. Think about how consumers digest and view content these days. It's primarily through video. It's very quick. So those are the kind of areas that I'd recommend.
Excellent. So for our last topic, guys, we've gathered some questions that dealers have been asking specific to our website platform, and some of you may already be familiar with that are watching this, and that is T-Advantage. Mike, I'll stay with you for this one. What flexibility is there with third-party integrations with T-Advantage?
Yeah, so one of our tenets that we enforce is to ensure that our platform is flexible enough to integrate with all third parties that dealers request. In some cases, when we don't have the third-party integration already built in, we do work with the dealer and that third-party provider to build in that integration. So it is something that we focus on. We pride ourselves on the fact that we allow and have actually a lot of third-party integrations already built in.
Excellent. And then what would be some of the personalization options available in the T-Advantage platform, Mike?
Yeah, going full circle to the delighting piece. How are we going to delight consumers, all right? And that is by providing them a personal experience. So really what we do is we focus on that piece. And generally, the way we look at it is providing building blocks for the dealer to be able to build in these personal experiences. By building blocks, what I mean is think of these as potentially widgets, things such as sliders, search facets, banners, vehicle carousels. And each of these building blocks, a dealer can start to write specific rules around. Now, you can utilize these without rules, and they're pre-configured with base set of rules. So if a consumer is looking at a specific type of vehicle or a set of vehicles, those building blocks, those pieces will slowly start to adjust the content to ensure that the consumer can find what they are interested in. However, dealer also has the flexibility, and this is where the delight piece really comes in, is, for instance, if you're running a specific promotion, or if there's a really specific incentive around a type of vehicle, and also if you want to utilize maybe some of your own creative assets, so around banners and so forth, dealers have the capability to be able to create these rule sets, and sometimes they can be really complex, to get the right incentive, get the right message in front of a type of cohort or a specific type of user.
Excellent, thanks, Mike. Matt, you might be in a better position to answer this question. Should a dealership be required to adhere to specific guidelines as prescribed or directed by their OEM Does T-Advantage provide that flexibility and compliance so that they are aligned with the said guidelines by the OEM?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an area for our business that, as you know, we've been focusing on for the last 2 years, more in depth, and have been able to actually earn ourselves a certified position with Stellantis Canada, with Ford of Canada, with Kia of Canada, most recently with Hyundai of Canada, with Mitsubishi Canada, Nissan. So those are all documented certified partners of ours for the T-Advantage website solution. And then for some other OEMs where there may not be a formal certified program in place, we are absolutely happy to build the dealer's site so that it is aligned with the style guide or the brand guideline that the dealer's given from their OEM. And so we have a website services team who will fully customize the site to ensure that the dealer is compliant with that guideline specification. For the certified programs, those requirements are made up front, and we commit to those. And actually, all the heavy lifting is done on the dealer's behalf with the agency partners on those programs, whether it's AutoData or Shift Digital or Boulevard Agency. And we work really closely with those agencies. And some of the benefits to those programs is that it automates things like inventory feeds and incentive calculations against their inventory. For some of them, it even includes feeds of inventory that the dealer may not have on ground, which is helpful for the dealer so that they can showcase and publish that inventory on their site, even though it may be on order and not yet in stock. Automation of things like creative assets within the site that coincide with the programs. So there's a lot of benefit to dealers who do join up with us on those programs. And then for off-program dealers, like I said, it's all handled through our website services team, and we're happy to customize it as needed for the dealer.
Thanks, Matt. And Mike, one final question that was frequently asked by dealers: how often does the T-Advantage platform undergo enhancements and updates?
All the time. So we have a schedule of weekly releases. So generally we like to put work out on a weekly basis. And everything from small feature requests all the way up to larger pieces of innovation we release. So it's continuously evolving, continuously improving. One point maybe to highlight there also is inside our team, we build a culture of business testing. So this is our UX team. They focused on putting consumers through different platforms, not just our own, to understand what the consumers' needs and how they search through information, how they consume information. And this is something that's ongoing. So we've got constant tests, usability tests running. Generally, we look at we have three in parallel running, and they're continuously changing. And that feeds, there's kind of a feedback loop into our innovation pipeline. So everything that we put forward is tested by consumers, just to ensure that we spend the right time on the right pieces, and then ultimately drive KPIs, not just for us, but also for the dealers.
Excellent. Mike and Matt, thank you for providing those valuable insights and your advice on dealership websites. For those of you who are watching this, if you're interested in a free assessment of your existing website, or you want to learn more about Trader's website solution, T-Advantage, you can go to go.TRADER.ca/T-Advantage. And on behalf of myself, Mike, and Matt, thank you to everyone that tuned into this. And feel free to send us your thoughts about today's episode, and you can email us directly at b2bmarketing@trader.ca. And you can email us there if you're interested in any other topics that you feel would be of some value to you. We hope you can join us for our next Trader Talks. Again, Mike, Matt, thank you very much. Stay safe and stay tuned.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mike.